Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 156 of Humanity Rising. Humanity Rising is an initiative of Ubiquity University and now over 350 partnering organizations from literally all over the world in over 125 countries that have come together during this extraordinary pandemic to create a sacred space, a global commons, so that people from around the world can come together on a daily basis to share their experiences as we all navigate through this unprecedented global challenge that's put most of us in some form of lockdown and engaging in social distancing and wearing masks and engaged in a hyper-aware relationship with our health and the health of others. A place where we can share our solutions and our visions and our hopes and our dreams for a better future. And as we bring 2020 to a close, we'll be having our final session on Friday. We thought today would be an opportune time to bring some of the people together who helped to create Humanity Rising. People that were there more or less at creation, and a few others that have come along and joined along the way. So I want to welcome everybody. I want to say also that thanks to John Raymond, we are being broadcast out not only to the 30, 40 regular channel partners, but to an additional 40 channel partners. So we're going out to a substantial number of people today. And I want to welcome all of you out there around the world to this offering by people of goodwill to see if in fact people of goodwill can actually come together in such a way that we can make a difference at a crucial, critical, precarious time in human history. Because that's where we're at today. The pandemic came at a moment when scientists were already telling us that we were running out of time, that basically the most optimistic scenarios is that we've got maybe 10 years to turn this thing around, at the center of which is runaway climate change. During the pandemic, scientists concluded that the ice shelf on Greenland is now irretrievable. It's going to melt, dramatically increasing ocean levels. During 2020, it was also concluded that the Arctic is now in irretrievable melt. So the crisis that we're in is of a severity that it not only stopped our world, stopped our economies, stopped our schools, put humanity on its haunches, as if nature was sending us to our rooms to think about things. But the pandemic itself has been a symptom of the crisis that we're in. It did not come out of the blue. So today, we want to reflect on some of the fundamental issues that have been emerging for all of humanity. Issues around how we've all been doing. Because 7, 8 months later, as we close out 2020, we look back and the pandemic didn't go away in the summer as we thought it might. And in fact, it's dug in. And in some countries like South Korea, that was a paragon of virtue in the spring as a country that had figured it out. Yesterday, the Minister of Health said that Seoul is a war zone and that South Korea is facing imminent medical collapse. The United States, as we've reported, is off the charts with a government that basically did nothing and engaged in the extraordinary policy of herd immunity, thinking that, well, if enough people get infected, it's all going to be okay. And now the United States stands as 4% of the human population, with between 20 and 25% of all the cases and all the deaths of all the people in the world. There's not a country on earth that even comes close to the case rate or morbidity rate as the United States. So all of us are being challenged. So this is an ideal time to take counsel. But before we launch into our program, I just want to, again, thank everybody for coming. And I'd like to invite everybody now to take the next minute or so, take a few deep breaths, close your eyes, and place your attention on your heart. See if you can listen to your heartbeat in a spirit of gratefulness, of thanksgiving that you're alive at this most extraordinary moment in the long journey of humankind. Thank you, everyone. Now, with an open heart, I want to welcome our guests today. All of them you will know. They've all been on Humanity Rising, some once and a number of times, convening panels or participating as panels. It was a really fascinating. Now that I think back on it, you remember back in February and March when the pandemic hit. At first, no one quite knew what it was. We'd heard of other viruses over the last 10 to 15 years that were of concern, but seemed to just dissipate away. And I certainly was among those who thought, well, this is something that probably will be a minor nuisance as I was traveling around the world and doing my thing. And I was in Amsterdam and on my way to Colombo to launch a major project with the Ministry of Education in Sri Lanka. And all of a sudden, we were all put under lockdown. And Sri Lanka closed its airport. And all of a sudden, we took in that this was not an ordinary epidemic, that this was, in fact, a pandemic that we'd been warned about and we'd been concerned about for a long time, but had finally arrived. And like virtually everyone else, I and Ubiquity, we kind of put our heads down and thought we're going to make it through. And then all of a sudden, it began to dawn on me, hey, this is the Chinese curse, man. If this is a crisis, and this is a real crisis, there's got to be a significant opportunity here somewhere. So we began to talk about it as a staff. Where's the opportunity? What could we possibly do to offer into the world something of value? None of us had ever been under lockdown. None of us had ever engaged in social distancing. I didn't even know the term. I'd never worn a face mask. What do you do under those circumstances? And then the suggestion was made, why don't we convene these daily gatherings in open space? Because Zoom had appeared. An extraordinary synchronicity that just as the world closes down and we can't move anywhere, Zoom makes it possible to go everywhere and to talk with everybody for free. So it wasn't rocket science, and we sent out some emails, and I contacted a number of people, including my old friend Steve Farrell, who I've known for forever, and one of the, is the founder of Humanity's Team, as you all know, and just one of the icons of Silicon Valley, and has been working in building global awareness for 25 years. And I called Steve, we had a chat, and I talked with other people. And the next thing we knew, we had a tsunami on our hands as everyone said, yes, let's start to come together. And all of a sudden, Peter Mary, our Chief Innovation Officer, said, let's call it Humanity Rising. This is a moment for humanity to just rise together, virtually, and take the creative actions that are available to us to enhance our strategic effectiveness to make sure that the world beyond the pandemic is more abundant and resilient and kind and healthy. So on May 22nd, we launched, and we haven't looked back since. It's been one of the most remarkable experiences of my whole life. It has been remarkably positive for all of our partners and for Ubiquity University and everything that we're doing. But we didn't really know how long it was going to last. We just made the commitment to endure as long as the pandemic unfolded. And here we are on the 9th of December, and we're still here because the pandemic is still here. So I'd like to introduce our panel. If you turn on your videos and just going across my screen, Anne-Marie Verhoeven, I've known for years. She's part of the Hague Center for Peace and Governance. She's known Peter Mary and the Ubiquity team for many, many years, and has been one of the inspirations to our Ubiquity community, and someone that we knew all along the way. Like we're just motivated by social justice and world peace. So Anne-Marie, welcome. Bente Milton, from her work on CityTransformers and other initiatives where she's been bringing youth together from all over the world, and has been working in Copenhagen to bring donut economics to that fair city, and has been just a very devoted and loyal friend and partner for many years, always pushing the edges of technology into virtual and 3D and virtual reality, and is just one of the creative intelligences of the network. So welcome, Bente. And John Raymer. John, I got a chance to know, and I have seldom had a conversation that was more scintillating than our first conversation, John. I mean, you completely turned me on, man, with your vision of how, you know, we could take Humanity Rising and we could live stream it. You took me into areas. I was still back in the 20th century. And John Raymond brought me firmly into the 21st century with the possibilities of what you could really do with Zoom and what you could really do with live streaming. So to a large degree, John, you've been the godfather of Humanity's Rising's success out there in the future. And then John introduced me to an incredible group of people. And amongst them was Shelley, Ostroff, and Jan Golding. I talked with them and heard about all their projects on water and code for healthy living and other things that they were doing. And Shelley and Jan, you were an inspiration right at the beginning before we knew it was all going to work. And your optimism and your incredible enthusiasm to just do whatever needed to be done was one of the inspirations for me that was a signal that this was the right thing to do, with kind of might and main to bring into the world. So Shelley and Jan, I really want to acknowledge your generosity of spirit, I would say, and your golden hearts. It was really extraordinary. And Kurt, similarly, talking with Kurt and the wisdom, Kurt, that you bring, born of years of being literally on the front lines, everyone. You know, I would say for everybody on this call, saving the world is not a weekend delight. It's a 24/7, 365 commitment that's coming out of the depths of the soul. And that's what makes it real. And that's what makes people like Kurt Johnson the authentic man that he is. And so, Kurt, I just want to acknowledge your contribution. He convened a couple of the panels with just such elegance and brought such warm-heartedness to Humanity Rising. It was really good to have you on board. And then Rick, who I've known forever, like Steve, 11 Days of Peace, and we worked together to get Desmond Tutu and Vandana Shiva and various others, and did a double header on that particular day, the 11th of September to the 21st of September. So Rick, I just want to acknowledge, again, you're just one of the warriors that stayed at it time beyond time. And Ben Bowler, who couldn't join us because he's in Sydney and it's 3 o'clock in the morning. But I just want to acknowledge Ben and Unity Week and everything that all of us have been doing throughout this pandemic. So I want to just launch into a conversation. We're not going to kind of go around. I just want to open it up to friends and colleagues around 3 issues. First, just how everybody's kind of assessing the pandemic 7 months on, feels like 7 years, and how you fared, how your initiatives that you conceived before the pandemic fared as a result of the pandemic. And then we'd like to talk about how you're assessing accomplishments that have been either brought about by you or others, like, for example, the city of Amsterdam in May when they embraced donut economics. What are the accomplishments that we can point to as 2020 comes to an end? that we can say, yes, we got closer to our goal. And then thirdly, how are we viewing 2021? And what are our plans and aspirations for the next year on the calendar? So that's our agenda for today, everyone. So let's just open it up to comments that any of you would like to make about how you're assessing the pandemic as the year closes out, how you did, what you learned, and just anything that you would like to share.
Well, I can start, Jim, to thank you for taking this, opportunity and bringing this initiative to life. I'm amazed that we're still here after all of these months, and that you've been soldiering on every day and still are. So that's been amazing. And when we were in March, before it kind of really seriously broke out, we were planning this event for Peace Day 2020, bringing youth together on Youth Island near Copenhagen, UN city. And we envisioned all of these youngsters traveling to Youth Island and meeting with change leaders to sit down and counsel about the future. And then all of a sudden, everything was under lockdown and we couldn't bring anyone to Youth Island, at least only a small group. But as you said, it opened a window of opportunity to actually reach out to youth, youngsters in 100 cities and bring them together on Zoom, online, and create these virtual tables with roundtable discussions and an amazing resource of youngsters from 6 different continents came together and said, yes, we're ready to step up to the challenge and take action and let's do something. And out came this declaration that they produced and that they handed over. We had a Viking ship sailing from Youth Island to the UN city with a delegation of youngsters handing over this declaration to the director of UNDP, who promised to take it to the General Assembly and bring the sort of voices of the youth to the table there. And so it's been like an amazing sort of coming into a deep crisis and then turning it into an opportunity of hope and optimism and, the energy carried forward by the youngsters. So for me, it's been amazing.
Fantastic. Yeah, sort of like Humanity Rising, that you go into the storm and you use it as a trim tab to increase your efforts. And it sounds like CityTransformers, like Humanity Rising, was able to use the pandemic as a trim tab to actually increase the intensity and effectiveness of what you were seeking to do. Yeah, good one.
And actually, I just want to add that we met people through the Humanity Rising panels who kind of came together thanks to this initiative that are now sort of key partners. And we've had an amazing journey together. It wouldn't have happened without Masterpiece, who joined very early on because Art Bosch was on the panel and we talked and shared dreams and visions for the future. So he jumped on board. There was Peace Child International. There's, of course, Anne-Marie has been on board for quite a while on this journey. But yeah, so you also created a platform where people could meet up and team up and take action together, which is amazing.
Good. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I want to share because I am so grateful to Humanity Rising for stepping up at this critical time. And in fact, the work that Bente you're just describing is been dovetailed to be a part of what's emerging right now. There are a few things that were so inspiring. So the indigenous voices are awakened and arising. This enlightening our way together convergence that's about to unfold that launches the Global Center of Indigenous Sciences and Ancestral Wisdom. We were so inspired by the youth and their desire to meet with the indigenous elders and the embracing of donut economics. All of this has been happening for us together in this space. So, You know, someone said a crisis is a terrible thing to waste, and without making light of the real suffering and the real sense of fear and panic that so many people are feeling. But for those of us who have our health and are blessed, I feel like we're realizing this is a moment unlike anything we've ever seen before. And this liminal space between, you know, no longer and not yet is offering us a huge opportunity to rise together. And the platforms and the technology that are here are just rising with us. And I feel so privileged and blessed to be a part. Thank you, Jim, so much, and everybody here. I feel connected in ways that we've never felt before. And I feel that the moment for us to rise beyond our rising, to discover what's over the event horizon here, and to know that we can only do this together, and that we are stronger together. And we've seen that in so many examples of this. And of course, there's this sense of that it's just so wild right now, the great conjunction happening astrologically. I heard yesterday that the Israelis are convinced that there's a great federation, the Galactic Federation, they've got places on Mars. I mean, there's nothing you could tell me right now that's, oh no, that can't be. It's reached this point. I think the science fiction writers must be complaining that, wait a minute, we can't keep up with imagining a new reality, because what was so wild to believe could happen is actually our reality right now. So I've been blessed and inspired. We are eager to continue to grow this movement forward at this time, to realize that, like you said, you know, Chinese proverb, if we don't change our direction, we're likely to wind up where we're headed. Well, the humbling experience of this pandemic is definitely bringing us to the point where we need to change our direction. We know it. And in that way, it's a huge blessing. But I say that at the same time, understanding that there's so much real suffering and fear in the world. And we can't ignore that. And in the United States, we can't ignore how many people voted for Trump again. And that's something that we're determined to heal, that divide, and learn to listen past our judgments and start to ask and not assume, and start to find a way to unite again. This is the challenge of our time here in the U.S. We've got some healing to do, and let this togetherness that we're finding be a great source of inspiration for that.
Yeah, John, absolutely. What's interesting here is that everybody who's on this program, everybody listening as well, that we're all into this paradigm of partnering. And we absolutely know, even from modern evolution, that there's actually nothing stronger than a group of cooperative, altruistic people. There's nothing that's stronger than that combination, even as far as evolution works. And so we're really at a global threshold, scientifically, actually an anthropological threshold, whether our species is going to more toward partnering and toward that pro-social consciousness, or whether we're going to run back to fear and division, because that's where we feel safety is, as opposed to unity. And we know much more about division than we do about unity. So this is actually a global and consciousness related threshold. So all of us, I think the lesson from 2020, and certainly the lesson going into 2021, is how we increase that partnering, so that ripple effect that you mentioned really gets out to humanity, that the answer for safety is in an intimate unity and not in fear and division and all the things that we've known from the past. And I think, you know, all of us know in our direct experience, personal space, that is the truth of the matter. It's all about the well-being of everyone. And I think we can fearlessly and with all of our energy steer ahead. I know we have to consider the metrics and who's out there and are we growing and all of these things, but there's absolutely no doubt that this message that has to get out about the potential positive future of who we are as Homo sapiens is the one that really has the traction, both spiritually relative to our true nature and as far as evolutionary process itself. I mentioned just one other thing. Even as we're speaking now, so many things are happening. I think so many of you know that the gospel of selfishness and greed is good was really Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. And in the last week, David Sloan Wilson, who's the most well-known evolutionary biologist in the world, has published a counter proposal and novel sequel to Atlas Shrugged called, guess what? Atlas Hugged. And it is getting major attention now in the academic and intellectual political community. So we have all of these currents and countercurrents that are happening. We can really celebrate those, and everybody who's on this panel is a part of that phenomenon.
So
I love that, Kurt. Atlas Hugged.
Yeah, hats off to David. I don't know who came up with that title, Atlas Hug, but that's beautiful. So yeah, my thanks here too, Jem, to you and your organization, actually to everybody here, because this is a real activist organization where this is a group that's living at 7x24, and I suspect that viewers are in the same category actually. So to all of us that are answering the call, where it's more of a life is more of a calling than a career. So just to maybe emphasize one other point in here. We were talking when we came in about the silver lining and the value in slowing down, and in sequester, just going into contemplation, into that inner space, into this place of connection. And in humanities team, we think this is the biggest thing, actually. The biggest reason for COVID is we were just racing in this old American dream toward materiality, and our spiritual self, our soul that we weren't even in touch with, that was more of a physical, emotional life, was just not getting any attention or little attention. And so the problem at its basis is a spiritual problem, we believe. And it's not one that we can just solve with our vocal cords, where we just come into this awareness and these skills of what unity consciousness is and oneness and so on. Because actually, just like in any organization, if the leaders in the organization are just articulating the message, they're just voicing what the direction is and what the goals are, etc., little will happen. The long-term success never comes from that. It only comes from an expression, a being state expression of this unity consciousness, of this oneness, of this connection, where people can feel this new sense of who we are, and who other people are, and who the earth is and the animal kingdom is, and where that comes to life, where we're, and each of us, of course, in our own way, we're called to different stations in life. Some of us more as truth tellers, others of us more as healers. We each have a different role that we're playing, but where we embody this truth that we're deeply feeling, which is from this place of spiritual connection, from this place of I'll even call it communion. Now that's very powerful. And where we're doing that together, as we are, all of us on camera and people also viewing now. Now that then creates this pivot to conscious living from the unconscious living that we were racing toward before COVID. And this creates the opportunity for the long-term change, and this whole, sometimes it's called heaven on earth, this real flourishing of life at every level that we can create. In fact, that we are creating now. It's not even something out in the future. It's that, again, viewers and people on camera, we can actually feel that flourishing now. It's part of our life now. And so just like when we talk about heaven on earth, when you go to Mars, you could talk like Elon Musk about just this this whole civilization on Mars. Well, the journey to Mars starts with a device that's actually landing on the planet, and it's just landing, and then later they gather soil samples, and then it grows and grows and grows into one day a full-on civilization. Well, likewise, the heaven on earth has already started. It's already begun. It's living inside of many of us. That's what the conscious living is. And together we're growing what has already been birthed into the world. And this year, 2020, has been a real catalyst, I think, for that. And I say that with real appreciation for all the souls that have given their lives to COVID, that I think on some level had a sacred contract to be born into the world and to support this pivot into conscious living.
Yeah, what you say, Steve, reminds me, Rick sent me a quote from Van Jones yesterday, and it says, it's in that convergence of spiritual people becoming active and active people becoming spiritual that the hope of humanity now rests.
Yeah,
I think
amen. The vertical and horizontal, and Kurt, you and David Sloan Wilson and Jeff bring in the vertical and horizontal, which is so crucial. Starts with the vertical, that connection, but then the horizontal, all of these things where we're engaged, which is what your quotes bring in here, Jim.
Yeah.
I
Good. Well, thank you, Steve.
I would like to say something to that, indeed, because I think, I have such gratitude in that sense for the way that, Jim, you and the team, and also the hosting team of Humanity Rising, because I've always been so warmly welcomed and held. You've made a lot of the subjects and issues that we have been working with so normal. You brought it into a context where we have been, you said something about saving the world. I don't feel that my life purpose has been to save the world, but to co-create the world and how to do that and to feel where there are restrictions and what is serving me. And a lot of those things we couldn't speak about, or they would not be understood, or we would be looked at kind of like, well, crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what you've done, what you've been able to do with the team and with all the people that you've brought in and that we've brought in and that we've been working with in different ways, you've been able to give it a language and a place and a status that it can be seen as, well, what if it's normal? What if it's true? What if this is the path, which has also to do with that alignment, that vertical and that horizontal alignment. Also giving voice to the new scientists and bringing that into context again and again and again, what this is about. And so I really have, I think that if I look, back, referring to your question, that has been such a support, invisible and very visible too. And then being able to bring that into the World Unity Week, the Up Convergence, the Peace Weekend, all those activities where you were kind of like putting it all out there. There we could really come together and work it further through and see if we could come up with communities of practice that could take it on. And my longing for 2021 is that out of that, then it much more easily and also more explosively feeds back into the Ubiverse. And so that at a certain point in ubiquity, all the young people and all the young at heart that are wanting to do anything that has to do with education and to further develop their capacities have access to everything that we've been doing. But you've already started that. So building that also, I think, is extremely important, because what we've learned also in 2009 in Belo Horizonte and after that was that the process of, if we look at Elizabeth Sotura's story and other stories of the butterfly, the imaginal cells, they first come up and they're taken, and then at a certain point when they start to connect, that's when the next steps come. And for that, it's the networks need to see themselves and be named and be lit up. We need to find each other to practice and learn and cross-pollinate. And then the next version, what we call meshworking or multi-stakeholder or whatever you want to call it, but coming into action for superordinate goals, what we're trying to do now, I think that's the next phase that can really be powerfully supported by our networks here too.
Yeah, well, thank you.
And there's one more thing I would like to say, add to that,
Sure.
to all of you actually, because I feel that you've also given space. And in the beginning, it was kind of like figuring it out how that works. But now I feel there's much more space also for the feminine part to really be brought in and to feel safe in that sense, to come up and share. That is even more easy, I think, going for some people that are really more leaning into that side in the upconvergence and those settings where there's really an emergent conversation, co-creation, etc. But still, also there with the whole balancing with you and the team, and that also is, gratitude for that, because I also feel much more, able to be present.
Right, good. Well, thank you, Anne-Marie. And I think your comment right at the beginning that it's not about saving the world, it's about co-creating the world. That is such an important distinction. It's like moving from sustainability to regeneration.
Oh, yes. And
We're not here to
beyond.
save the world, ladies and gentlemen. We're here to
No.
co-create it. That is such a profound tectonic shift. So thank you for bringing that into our awareness.
With all of life, all beings.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's segue to the second area around what have we seen that is an accomplishment? You know, we all know that the world is going to hell in a handbasket, as they say, faster and faster, and we're all alarmed. But I think there's a opportunity to just reflect on what happened, even at a macro level, that really pointed the way forward. And just to generate the conversation, I would say 3 events I have found in the last 7 months to be totally and absolutely astonishingly positive. The first is Amsterdam. And the fact that a major metropolitan city in the midst of the pandemic would publicly declare that they're embracing donut economics. And that, as I think most of you know, was like a shot heard round the world, as it were, and all of a sudden, all kinds of cities, regions, even countries began to say that they were wanting to follow Amsterdam's lead. So I think that was a real, and out of that has come an amazing initiative with Ed Muller and UCI and a whole new MBA. And Kate Rayworth is going to be doing our opening foundational course on the fundamentals of donut economics starting next May. The second thing that I think was a real achievement was the plebiscite in Chile in October, where the people of Chile overthrew the constitution of Colonel Pinochet back in the 70s, when he overthrew the democratically elected socialist government of Salvador Allende. And they made a step that no other country in the world has taken, saying that in the new constitutional convention, it's going to have to be 50% women, 50% men, and that in the new government, they're going to be mandating gender parity constitutionally for the future government of Chile. And I thought that was an extraordinary thing. And we had Carlos Prosser and a number of Chileans write the Monday after the weekend vote. And all they kept breaking into song. If you saw that session, they were so excited by the fact that the Chilean people woke up, stood up, and voted. It was a powerful, powerful inspiration. And that I would point to. And then thirdly, I would point to the United States and the fact that we have not only reaffirmed in the United States the capacity of holding democratic elections, but our court system, after years of being hammered and stacked, has ruled in favor of the constitutional process of democratic elections in every single case so far. And speaking as an American citizen, my fear was that Trump was going to succeed in breaking the back of American democracy, and he did not. And so as we assess 2020, I think there are some major areas in which the world came together and did some things that pointed the way forward. You know, if you think of what would have happened if Trump had succeeded in breaking the back of democracy in the longest continuous democracy in history, what that would have foreshadowed for the future would have been pretty grim. And now Trump is out. And we still have the issue, John, that you raised, you know, why did so many people, 74 million people, vote for Trump? That's an issue. But the integrity of the American democratic process withstood an attempted coup from the White House. And that is no mean accomplishment. And so I would
And
point
you know,
to that.
Jim, the other thing that was amazing to me is the response to the death of George Floyd around the world.
Yes.
The racial
Yes.
inequality conversation is now, it was part of Biden and Harris's campaign, that conversation around the world, in spite of the pandemic.
Yep.
People came out onto the streets and said no. And we need to learn to have this conversation around the world.
Right.
Yeah. Very, very important. I mean, if you look back over 2020, the death of George Floyd has got to be the iconic moment. And, you know, and it's worth contemplating. You might want to reflect, any of you on the panel, that, you know, he died saying, "I can't breathe." And COVID is a respiratory disease where people can't breathe. And I thought at the time, in wonder at the intricacy of the world. Hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of Black men have been killed. But this one death, in this one way, in the midst of a pandemic about breathing, stopped the world and generated a conversation, the equivalent of the Me Too movement. It's been quite extraordinary. Yes, thank you, John, for bringing that in. It's a very a seminal achievement of 2020.
So Rick, I think you had opened your mouth a few times, but nothing came out.
Yeah, go Rick.
Well, that's what John started talking about is what I was going to bring up about the reckoning in the U.S. about ending racism and inequality, because inequality perhaps is a larger it's a larger concept, because it's economic inequality that's also on the table, and all of these things go along with the crisis of the pandemic. And for me and We the World and we.net and all things about this is all about how we are starting to think
about we is it's becoming the headlines. You know, like if one person in a community now has COVID, then the entire community is at risk. So it's the idea of the survival of the community depending on the health and well-being of each member of the community. And that is the whole essence of we and we consciousness. So the idea now is for us, all of us with Global Oneness Day, 11 days of global unity, and 7 days of rest, and all of these actions and activities that we're doing to get to create that cultural shift, so that we extend that concept, so that if one person is homeless in a community, then the entire health and well-being of the community is endangered. If one person does not have a job or is not able to go to school, or, you know, you can think of all the different aspects, then we are all at risk. And that's what we is all about. And I think for us, the people who are doing this, like you were saying, Steve, 24/7, there's another positive thing that has come out during this pandemic, and I became aware of it a few weeks ago. I mentioned it on one of our Unity Earth meetings, but I also mentioned it in our We the World team meetings, which is that we are watching the evolution of teams becoming families. And it's so striking. And I think this is happening as a kind of an interesting side effect of the pandemic, where people are spending so much time online together. So even if you're in different locations, we are becoming families and looking out for each other. And it's so important for that to happen. It's like a close knitting of this work. So it's not just, okay, let's work together, but now we're concerned deeply emotionally with what we are all doing. And that's happening. And maybe that's happening in a larger sort of a mega or meta sense. Now, the sort of families of families, you know, we're talking about networks of networks. So maybe this is becoming families of families. And I wonder, Jim, if you've been noticing that with Humanity Rising.
Oh, yes. I mean, the community that's even in the chat group, you know, we broadcast out, you know, to 15, 20,000 people or so, probably more today. And there's 100, 150 people that actually join the Zoom calls, and they've become family. They've become community. And in fact, every day after the session, there's an after session chat group, and you're all welcome, by the way. We'll put the link in if you can join for 5 or 10 minutes, just to, in a more informal atmosphere, participate in a growing community, in a growing family. So that's a very important point, the consolidation through virtual means of intimacy. And as John said, I think it was a really important point you made, John, and now Rick, we've shown to ourselves it's possible. Before the pandemic, I think we were in this divide between being in person and being online is definitely second best. And now we're finding that through virtual interconnectivity, you can really have some deep community and intimacy. And so that's a very important point, Rick. Thank you. Thank you. Shelley, Jan, what would you two add to this conversation?
Yeah, well, first of all, I also want to just really express my deep gratitude to Humanity Rising. And it very much links to one of the good things for me that's happened this year, which is an extraordinary rising of citizens around the world to start reclaiming our authority to make the change that's needed. I think we're moving from a place of dependence on authority to really, as Anne-Marie says, co-creators. Humanity Rising, I think, is one of the extraordinary examples of leadership in this way, which really helps us to see the system. And that whole system picture, all of the different aspects that make up the whole, and bringing in the diverse voices to the same table, I think is a huge accomplishment. There have been many other organizations, including Sign and Unity Earth and everything that Rick and Steve and THC and everyone's doing. And beyond that, we've met many, many organizations this year that are just bringing so many gifts to the collective table. I think that one of the main things that's happened this year for me has been I think as humanity, we're becoming more and more aware of how sick we really are. And the issue of health is really predominant now. Up until now, the body is very resilient. And so there's been a lot of disease in the body, but we haven't necessarily all experienced the same symptoms. And so the disease has been pocketed, and many of us have been somehow kind of protected from it. Today, I think that there's collective recognition of this collective disease, and it's very, very deep. So we're standing at this bifurcation point at the moment where I think that if we go to the roots of the issue, we have to start understanding health in a new way, not from a reductionist, Western, technocratic, profit-oriented, mediated language, but rather to go back to the language of health, the language of life. With all of these accomplishments, I just heard today that the New York Stock Exchange is now has commodifying water, which is, to me, terrifying. It's just another example of the way in which water has become a commodity, and when we actually impact the source, the sustenance, the medicine of all life, none of us can have health, and yet we are continuing to really poison, own, commodify, prevent water from getting to not only humans, but to the ecosystem. So I think one of the things that's so important that's happening this year is that we're also moving, but sometimes I wonder if quick enough. Ultimately, I am optimistic because I see the rising and I see the answers coming forth and I see the solutionaries. But I think that there are forces at work now that are deeply endangering the real healing process. And I think that languaging around the pandemic at the moment, which is very much in the language of the media of yes virus, no virus, what's the cause, but ultimately we're not really hearing those people who understand health from a holistic perspective. And I think that one of the needed conversations that needs to happen at the moment is how do we, if we were to look at our global pandemic and other symptoms that we're experiencing of violence and conflict and poverty and migration and drought and all of these, if we really look at this and those extraordinary connections between George Floyd and the inability to breathe, I think that we can find mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually a lot of wisdom around how to approach the whole system healing of humans and the environment. And so this shift, yes, we're recognizing that, we can't have health without our neighbor or anyone else having health. We're becoming more empathic to other human beings. Hopefully, some of us, most of, however, I think what we're still not taking into account is that our human-centered, still colonialist attitude towards the planet, where we can penetrate the earth, we can penetrate the water, we can infiltrate it, we can own it, we can commodify it, we can sell it, we can offer technological solutions to life. That becomes a place where technology, for me, it becomes, an illusion of omnipotence rather than a tool to heal the planet. So I think we're at a cusp now, and I feel very, I feel like we've brought together this year, and really this Humanity Rising has brought so much wisdom to the field, as has, there's a legacy and a whole system picture. And my prayer and hope and intention and action, because, we're also working to propose World Water Year 2021 and a World Water Law and many other codes for a healthy earth that really work with whole system healing principles. But my prayer is that we can really maybe even be inspired by the Chileans and say, if humanity managed to do it in one country, to overthrow a system that went against life, maybe humanity can join and rediscover and reinvent governance, because we can no longer survive with governance as country-based laws that deal with that own local resources, rather than seeing that the nature in that particular locality is part of the whole, and that we are accountable to the whole for how we look after that little piece of water or land or whatever it is that we have. So that's some thoughts around the achievements and some of the deep concerns as we move forward.
Beautifully put, Shelley. I mean, this whole commodification of water is just almost a horrifying specter, given what we know about water, the intelligence of water, and the universal presence of water. To commodify something like that is like commodifying the air. So it's a real issue. So thank you for raising that. Jan, is anything you want to add?
Wow, I'm just looking at the time. How long is the session? I think, I mean, I'm just loving what Shelley said, and really echoing, that kind of return to essence of what really are we calling forth in terms of exponential, the potential for possibly exponential whole system healing. What does that look like, and what are the discussions that need to happen and can happen around that? And I think Humanity Rising has definitely contributed to that hugely, also in bringing people together, helping groups to see each other for the first time and connect. And I guess the two things that I've been seeing, the two patterns, is this over the year is a real rise in online events spanning all topics and all sectors, and somehow envisioning the potential of all of these events and the speakers of these events and the participants of all these events being a massive force that can, in some way, possibly with the right impulse, the right call, the right timing, be activated for the kind of transformation that Shelley just spoke about. And another important thing I see that has arisen this year, also, I guess, what has been expressed in different ways, is that the pus is rising to the surface in many ways, across many sectors, throughout all our systems, throughout a lot of cultures and cultural conditioning. And I think that, some of these things that are rising up are really creating a lot of fragmentation, a lot of confusion. I've never seen the fragmentation that I've seen within this movement of people working for a better world. There is now, what I'm seeing, a massive, almost like a split down the middle in terms of how we view vaccines, for example. And then there are other conversations like 5G and all of these. And, you know, there have been patterns of kind of categorizing all these conversations and pushing them aside, and no, we don't want to go there because that creates division. However, for me, these are the dangerous questions that we need to now, those of us who really are dedicated to unity in a deep way, need to start having these conversations in a coherent way, not in throwing facts and shouting and back and forth, but let's have these coherent debates where we can really generate, you know, creative discussions that really find truth, because I think truth is one of the biggest pandemics. The lack of truth is one of the biggest pandemics we're suffering right now.
Well, thank you, Jan. And that's a good juncture to turn to our final session around how we're looking at 2021. And you are absolutely right, man. If 2020 was about the coronavirus, 2021 is about vaccines. And how we enter that discussion at a time when the big pharma, the governments, World Health Organization, the media are just lining up behind massive vaccinations. I think that's a conversation that we should have as we contemplate how we respond to something like commodification of water, or even the vaccinations. That's going to be a big issue for 2021. But I'd love to hear from, again, from any or all of you about what your plans are for 2021. You know, Steve, what are you planning for Humanity's team? And John, what the Sign Network is going to do? And Bente, what you've got planned for CityTransformers, et cetera. All of you, I've just hear your visions of the future and what you're getting set to unleash in 2021.
So let me first just say, you know, for me, as we're kind of synthesizing these important points that everybody's making, that this whole where commodification of water and air and all these horrible things, what happened to George Floyd, that this whole the American dream was a mirage. And I think that's maybe something that a lot of people are getting in touch with through sequester and through deeper contemplation. And I experienced it firsthand, as you mentioned, Jim. I came from Silicon Valley, and what I could see there is once you got to a net worth of whatever, let's call it $1 million, that then it needed to be 2. And then once you got to 2, it needed to be 4. There was no there, you know, it was just a mirage there. To illustrate that point, I know somebody that said he wanted to get deeply into philanthropy, but he was at 920 million and he needed to earn another 80 million. And then as a billionaire, he'd get into philanthropy. The old American dream is just a mirage. And the other side of that is what we call in Humanities team conscious living, which is all of these things that we're talking about, where we see there's no such thing as duality. There is only, you know, everything's deeply interconnected, interrelated, and interdependent. There is no duality. And when I was talking about spirituality, you know, we use the word divine in Humanities team, but life is just as good. They're two sides of the same coin. And conscious living is really just about the credo of serving life first. So as we talk about water, as we talk about air, as we talk about the earth, as we talk about each person, as Rick was bringing in, you know, it's just serving life first. It's in that simplicity. There's no such thing as duality. The the divine is embodied in all of life, and we don't even need to believe in the divine. We simply believe in the life and we serve life first, we create this heaven on earth. So now, as for humanities team, lots of things. Thank you to many of you were part of the Global Oneness Summit, and I imagine viewers too. And John, thank you for, you were broadcasting it out in every direction. Kurt was on, seemed like every panel, or coordinated half of them. Jim, all of you, thank you for Rick, for being a part of it. And the theme, of course, was the power of love, resetting humanity to a new way of living on the earth. And it is this whole serve life first. It's where love is our basis. We've got, Global Oneness Summit program next year, and we're already working on it. The program that we're going to launch the year with, which we're working on right now, is called New Kind of Power. And it's with Deborah Poneman and Christy Whitman. And I don't know if you know their stories, but so this old kind of power, which creates this American dream of where you marginalize people, and you have to be right, and others, you want to have the idea first, and all these things. That's nonsense. We don't go anywhere with that kind of power. The new kind of power is where our strength comes from this deep connection with life, and where we're in service, and service isn't something that is that's challenging for us in any way, or a sacrifice. It's actually creates this joy, and flourishing. And Deborah was just in Haiti, and she says, I'd much rather be here helping the people than in the Bahamas in my bathing suit, So these are the kinds, and then we're going to have program after program like that. We're the nonprofit in the transformational education field. The others are for-profits. And so we're aiming more at things like this of how can we support people on their conscious journey? Who are leaders that we can spotlight, that can really tell important stories, that support people, and that support the planetary awakening, and that support flourishing at every level of life. So that's the program we'll begin 2021 with, and
Perfect.
I don't want to take any more time, but lots of other exciting things.
Great. Thank you, Steve. I always know you're up to good stuff.
Thank
Any
you.
others? Just we have about maybe 10 minutes left. Any
I
others?
just want to say something about Steve, what you said, there's no duality, which I, of course, totally agree with. And what I'm noticing and seeing, and the many conversations I'm having, is that there is this notion of, but there are these polarities. How do I hold myself in those polarities? How do I go beyond that? So our focus, partly in all the contributions where we make and the connections that we bring together and co-create and serve with, is really also looking at how can we help ourselves and practice that we can transcend those polarities into a different state. And very clearly, it seems to help that then we also ground ourselves into place. So doing that, and I really appreciate the Cities Rising event we're starting off with in January, how that we can really, when we really connect to the place, not only on Zoom, that is also a place, yes, but the place where I am now, where I am here, and how those roots can help us to actually hold the polarity and then go beyond that, so that we can feel that unity and still accept that there are also polarities and there are also things that are differently expressed. And looking how new geometries can help us to understand and look at a different way using the Mobius strip and the torus and that kind of things is something that we're also going to be experimenting with, especially with the youth, because, wow, we really need to service and support the youth, because they're many, and they are very powerful, but they also need to get the floor so that they can play and show us, and that we can just be, as we call ourselves, keynote listeners.
Yeah, you know, one thing we brought up here, but we didn't follow it, is because it's a topic in itself, and that is, what is the power of the counterfactual narrative? What is the danger of it? Why is it so powerful? The 74 million people that voted really for a counterfactual narrative and continue to donate hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's just in the United States. So this whole thing about there's something in human nature, I've actually been on several panels with psychologists recently about what's behind this. And this is going to be a major factor as we go forward in our evolution. Will the stories that we tell actually be factually true stories in which we can make good critical decisions, or will they be counterfactual narratives that catch the fancy of our story-oriented nature, but could lead us off a cliff when it comes to critical thinking and good decisions at a global level? So it's a major factor going forward.
Yep. Yes, this kind of terror management syndrome. We've been fed fear for so long. And so what we did, we dropped a link in there. There's a pledge to unite, not fight. Let's work it out and not fight it out. And this is, for me, a good example of the bottom up rising up and saying, wait a minute here. And the message that's happening and enlightening our way together. I mean, Jim, this is going to be a holiday unlike any we've ever experienced on this in my lifetime. And the vision for the solstice and for what's happening astrologically as well as what's happening on Earth gives us a unique opportunity to come together. And then we're rolling into, in the new year, building beloved community. We've been blessed with a grant from the Corporation for National Community Service, MLK weekend, the 15th through the 18th, 2 days before the inaugural. And the message of Martin Luther King, like we were just saying, you want to make America great again? King said it. Everyone can be great because everyone can serve. And the whole idea, he said, this one other quote from MLK, he says, the aftermath of violence is bitterness. The aftermath of nonviolence is the creation of beloved community, so that when the battle is over, a new relationship comes into being. The end is reconciliation and redemption. This is the love that may well be the salvation of our civilization. So a revival of radical hope and love in the spirit of service is what we're planning in January as we come into this new year. And building beloved community is for us a frame that honors a cultural hero in Martin Luther King, which is perfect in line with this racial inequality conversation that we need to have.
Beautifully
What
put.
a time to be alive. What a time to be alive.
Yep. And, thank you, John. And, We the World is also participating in the MLK 40 Days of Peace. And for our set of projects, we're calling it Manifesting the Dream. So it's about honoring the work and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. And we had a meeting about this yesterday, and one of the things that came out is this idea. Do you remember a few years ago, people were talking about what would Jesus do? So we're going to start, what would MLK do? Right?
I love that.
Yeah. And so we're getting all of our campaigns, we have these 11 campaigns that came out of 11 Days of Global Unity, unity and interdependence, environment, economic justice, health, children and youth, women, human rights, freedom, disarmament, and peace. All of them are now working on aspects of honoring the work and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. in different ways, his work about ending racism, ending poverty, promoting nonviolence, and all of these things. So each campaign is now becoming mobilized. And by the end, we'll have lots of ideas about what would MLK do. and I put a link into the chat if anyone is interested in learning more. And of course, you can just go to we.net to find out more. And thank you, Jim, for everything that you've been doing and bringing us all together for this.
Yeah, and since Ben Bowler couldn't be on the call, I actually put into the chat box that You can track everything. You know, I think everybody on this panel is almost a part of the Unity Earth Network. So www.unity.earth to track everything that will be coming forward from them in 2021, and our partnership with them from lightonlight.us. And we'll be moving from our magazines now to also publishing books, including audiobooks, because we're really interested in the long shelf life products that really birth all these ideas for a long future. And Jim, thanks so much again for being a petri dish of how all this has been working together to come forward.
Well, you're welcome, everyone. And I would like to close out by asking each of you in one sentence to distill for everyone listening, what quality do you believe is essential as we close out 2020 and face 2021 under current world circumstances? Give us one sentence of the quality that you feel is just important for us to hold. I'm going to just call you out on my screen just to save time, starting with you, Anne-Marie.
Well, it has to be love and resilience.
Bente?
I'd say it's collaboration across borders, across disciplines, cultures, generations, so that we can co-create the future together.
John?
Faith above reason.
Shelley?
The wisdom that comes from empathy with all of life.
Beautiful. Jan?
I like your term, the radical collaboration. And I'll couple that with, deep loving discernment.
Thank you. Steve?
Open-hearted and involved.
Rick?
Well, I will quote from when Jonathan Granoff spoke at the opening of the We campaign and we.net. He said, "I hope that we expand so much that there is no longer any them."
Now that's quite a challenge.
We can do it.
We can do
How
it.
about you, Jim? How about you?
Kurt? We got good Kurt.
I was just going to say, I would say, live the bodhisattva life, the life of service.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. And I think I would say, just to add my sense of the quality, I would say it's two words, two phrases. One is radical collaboration. I think, as we all know, if we could really come together in our power as we, the them would melt away. And the other phrase for me is regeneration. I think that speaks to me of the severity of the crisis and the real challenge that humanity now has to come together in a regenerative way so that we create a world with which we can live sustainably. And I think those are two qualities as I'm finishing out the year that will, we are continuing to work on. Radical collaboration is this gathering today. Radical collaboration is Humanity Rising. Radical collaboration is everything all of you are doing. That's one reason why I invited you on the panel. You all embody radical collaboration, and you embody that spirit in all of humankind that surfaces during crises like this, that is open-hearted, that embraces faith above reason, that is deeply empathetic, that is the courage to be the bodhisattva, that is resilient enough to transport oneself and one's community through the thick and the thin of what's happening. And I think it's about these qualities that we have to continue to distill. And I want to just close by really acknowledging how all of you have offered yourself into this world at this time. I think, as various of you have said, this is all happening for a reason. We were born for this moment. And as we have this session, what I'm just feeling is in this group of people right now is the pulse of life, under duress, under siege, divided, that is nevertheless like a dandelion pushing up through the concrete, embracing that which is good in everything, and offering yourself into an unknown. And as St. John of the Cross says in his masterwork, The Dark Night of the Soul, his opening verse is, I went out without discerning and with nothing to guide me except that which in my heart was burning. And I think all of us have burning hearts, and I want to honor that and acknowledge that in all of you, because that is the light of the world, is our burning hearts.
No. Thank you so much.
So thank you, everyone. And for those of you who can stay for the after chat session, the link is up in the chat box. It's a beautiful time to just debrief after these sessions. And then tomorrow, we will have a group of people who are going to finish out with just a meditation on transitioning. How do we transition from here to there? We know we ain't in Kansas anymore. The pandemic has made that crystal clear. How do we transition? What is the Noah's Ark? What is the vehicle, the instrument through which we move to the other side? So that'll be our session tomorrow. And then on Friday is a conversation with Claire Dubois, the founder of Tree Sisters. We're going to celebrate trees.
No,
After the holidays on our final session, we're just going to celebrate trees.
Mm-hmm.
And so thank you all. This has been a beautiful, beautiful session. You've made my heart glad and full of love for each and every one of you. So thank you all. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And we'll see you again tomorrow on Humanity Rising, same time, same station, 5:00 p.m. Central European Time. Bye, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Jim. Humanity Rising, Ubiquity University. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you, Richard.
Thank you. So good to see all of you.
Yes,
Yeah.
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. Thank you
Godspeed,
so much,
each of you and all of you. Wonderful to be with you.
Game on. Game on.
Game on.
Game on.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.